What's up, everybody? We are here late morning Wednesday. We are moving further and further away from the end of the Seahawks 2023 season, and we're starting to turn our focus towards the offseason to see how the Seahawks can improve so they don't have a disappointing end the way they did in 2023. So, how do we make the 2024 season better? We do the right things in the offseason, and one of the big parts of the offseason is the draft. And I want to do this video here to talk about what the Seahawks might consider doing with their first round pick in the upcoming 2024 NFL draft. They pick 16th overall, and there are many directions they can go, but we can also kind of reduce those options down to probably a couple dozen, maybe I would even say something like 18 to 20 sensible options as of right now. Now, understand this is not me going in depth yet. That's going to come later in the offseason. We need to see the combine, and we need to see what the team does in free agency, because what the Seahawks do in free agency changes what they need and changes what they might draft. So understand that this is not me getting super deep into anything. This is just me introducing a selection of guys that I think are worth paying attention to as we start this draft process up. So this is just gonna kind of introduce you to the guys that I would recommend keeping an eye on. And in this video, we're gonna just do the offense. We're gonna focus entirely on the offense, and the defense will be a separate video. And the offense is relatively straightforward this year for the Seahawks. They're picking 16th, so that takes some stuff off the board. I don't think there's a running back who's worthy of going in the top 20 this year, and the Seahawks don't need a running back in the first round anyway. It would make no sense for them to take a running back in the first round, so that's not happening. They don't need a receiver. They're not taking a receiver in the first round because they don't need it, because they've already stacked their receiver room really well. Even if Lockett goes, guys, I still don't think you can spend a first round pick on a receiver. And while they do need tight ends, there's not going to be a tight end worthy of the 16th overall pick there, because Bowers will be long gone by then, and there's no other tight end who's, at this point, maybe even going to go in the top 50. I don't know, but certainly not mid-first round. So we don't need to worry about those positions. There are really only two positions that need to be discussed as it pertains to the Seahawks' first-round pick. And it's not our only pick, but it is certainly the most interesting pick we have. Obviously, we can end up taking players in later rounds that are better than players you take in early rounds, but as of right now, that is the most interesting pick we have. So, if we're going to invest that pick into the offense, then there are really only two places it makes sense to go. We have quarterback, and then we have the offensive line with a focus on left guard and right tackle. So let's process some candidates here. So we're going to start with quarterback, and I'm just going to say this up front. Regardless of what I want, I don't think the Seahawks are going to take a quarterback this year in the first round. I don't see it because, first of all, the top three are going to be gone, pretty much for sure. The true blue chippers in this draft, the true studs at quarterback, are going to be long gone by the time we pick. We're not trading up. We don't do that here. And it would be so expensive to trade up, I don't even want to. And bottom line is, I'm sure Pete Carroll is aware that for many different reasons, he doesn't have that much longer to pull this off. If Pete Carroll's here, the oldest head coach in the league with a contract that runs out in either 1 year or 2 years, he's trying to win now. And a win now move is not taking a quarterback in the first round when you already have a quarterback that you like. So I don't think this team is going to take a quarterback unless John Schneider has full, complete, absolute control of the draft process this year and can override Carroll and doesn't have to listen to a word he says and really, really likes one of these quarterbacks. But if Pete has any say at all here, he's not going to draft a quarterback in the first round, because in his mind, that's not something that helps us now. That's something that helps us in a year, 2 years, 3 years. And he's thinking he may not be there in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. He's trying to win now. And he feels like he can win now with the quarterback we have. And, I mean, I don't hate that mentality, but it is what it is. Nevertheless, I do want to discuss the quarterback possibility, and there are really only three guys. The first one is the guy you see on screen right here, Michael Penix Jr. I don't really need to say that much about him because if you watch my videos, you know all about him. Very, very productive in college the last couple years for the Huskies. Eighth in the Heisman voting in 2022. 2023, he finished a relatively close second to Jaden Daniels. Put up some monster numbers, high completion percentage, high yards, a lot of touchdowns. Um, Really, really phenomenal player across 2 years for Washington, and he did some interesting things at Indiana. This is personally not something that I'm interested in. I do think Penix goes in the first round, and I do think he can have success in the NFL. I just don't think it's going to happen in Seattle, where we're not going to be able to immediately give him a good offensive line, which he's really, really, really going to need. I think that it is fair to say that Penix leaned heavily on the system that he had in Washington. He leaned heavily on having superstar receivers. He leaned heavily on being able to run a system that works very well with his limitations as a player, which there are some. There are limitations with Penix, and I don't want to be messing with those limitations at the NFL level. I'm sorry. I love Penix. If we draft him in the first round, there is a part of me that is going to be excited because that's my guy. But at the same time, I'm going to be like, there's so many ways this can go wrong. The injuries, the questions about his ability to fit into a pro style offense, the ability that he has to make pro style throws is somewhat in question. The relative lack of mobility in most of the games he's played in his career. So for me, Penix, I would take him in the second round, and I don't think he's going to be there in the second round, so I say no anyway. Second quarterback I want to highlight here is Bo Nix. This is a guy that the Seahawks would probably want to trade down a little bit before they get, but he's got to be on the table here. He's had 2 really productive years at Oregon. In terms of just raw production, 2023 he was basically perfect. 45 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 4,500 yards. Basically showed up and played a really good game every game he played. You can't even say that about Penix. The only issue that he really had is that when he went head to head with Penix, he lost both games. And I don't know if he got outplayed both games, but it's at least arguable. He is another guy who may be a product of the system. The 77.4% completion is unsustainable in the NFL, but there is some intriguing stuff here. He's got good mobility. He can run well. He has a good arm. The way I see it, this could be a Jalen Hurts situation where he ends up being like a Jalen Hurts type in the NFL. I could also see him being kind of like rich man's Taysom Hill. Those are kind of what I feel like we're going to get with Bo Nix. He was not very good before he got to Oregon. When he was at Auburn, he looked very, very forgettable, very, very mediocre. And then he found new life at Oregon. That has to be a little bit suspicious to some people. And I personally am not a fan of this one either. I would take him in probably the third round. But if you're talking about spending a first round pick, even a late first round pick on him, that's something that would I would not appreciate. That's something that I would not be into. So that's your second guy. And the third guy, the third quarterback that I want to at least mention here is J.J. McCarthy because there is some hype around this guy maybe being a first round pick. Now, I think the Seahawks would probably trade down a little bit if they wanted him to get him, but at the same time, you never know. There could be a big rush on quarterbacks in this draft. So J.J. McCarthy was a guy who impressed me a pretty decent amount in 2023. He was very efficient. He avoided turnovers. He wasn't asked to do that much because Michigan was so dominant defensively. He usually didn't have to do anything by the midway through the third quarter, but he did make big plays on the opportunities he got. Like he only threw the ball 332 times in 15 games, didn't even get to 3,000 yards, but what you have there is 9 yards per attempt, which is actually good. So it's not like he's just checking it down and dumping it off and making easy throws. He does have a little bit of an NFL arm. He runs pretty well. He's small, but he has a better arm than you would expect for a guy this small. Now, do I want to spend a first round pick on this guy? Absolutely not. He's another guy who I'm looking at look, if he's there in the third round, I'm all over that. I actually kind of like him, but I don't like him the way that some of these mock drafts are starting to think of him as. I don't see a first round pick. There are too many limitations here. He's not that big. He was very well protected at Michigan by an elite running game and really just in a really elite roster. And there's just enough here that makes me think his ceiling might just be a good backup in the NFL. So I'm not into any of the quarterbacks, really. Not in the first round. Penix, second round, I could go for it. Just take a little bit of a risk. Bo Nix and J.J. McCarthy, third round, sure. But first round, I'm not into it. I just wanted to present it because these are three guys that are probably going to go somewhere in the middle to the late first round. So they're in play. Okay, so those are the quarterbacks. Now I want to go to the other area that the Seahawks might look at. I'm going to call this one right tackle slash left guard because right now the Seahawks need a stud left guard. Damian Lewis is a free agent, and they don't have any plan in place to replace him. Phil Haynes is a free agent too. They literally do not have a left guard under contract at the moment, and I don't get the sense that some of these guys are coming back. So we need to find a really nice left guard prospect, and we also need to be mindful of the fact that Abraham Lucas is potentially going to be an availability problem going forward because of that knee injury. The good news is the Seattle Seahawks are in a position where there are many very intriguing first round right tackles that you can take who might be able to bump over to left guard when they need to. Or vice versa. They're a left guard that can bump over to right tackle. There's a little bit of movability between those two positions. That's something we might be able to use to take advantage here. So, to my eye, there are five guys we need to keep an eye on. The first is J.C. Latham of Alabama. Has had a nice 3-year run, had a career year in 2023 for Alabama. Really good in zone, which I like. Really good pass blocker, really good run blocker. Just really a good, well-rounded player. Allowed a grand total of, what is this? A grand total of 14 quarterback pressures across 14 games at Alabama, so that's basically one a game. Spent all of his time these last 2 years at right tackle, but in the NFL level, he might be able to move to left guard. It really depends on how tall he ends up being at the combine. If he's really 6'6", that's a little bit tough, but doable. But if he ends up being more like 6'5", then he slots in very nicely at left guard. Second guy, similar boat here, Amarius Mims, Georgia guy. Had 3 nice years at Georgia. Never really peaked the way that you would expect a guy to peak in his final collegiate year, but good, solid, all-around player. Injury prone, though, definitely a bit of a concern. Did miss a lot of time at Georgia, but he's huge. There's a lot of talent here. And if he is, I'd say even like, I'd live with like 6'5". It will depend on what happens at the combine. He's a guy who will start at right tackle or left guard. So we're going to have to see what the combine says, but I think he's going to be on the list, on the menu as part of the conversation for this upcoming draft. Next guy would be Taliese Fuaga of the Oregon State Beavers. Had a monster year in 2023. Had a really good 3-year run, honestly. But the last 2 years, he's been killing it. Great all-around player. Great in zone. Great in gap. Amazing run blocker. And at 6'6" listed, he might actually be closer to like 6'5", we hope. He can easily bump over to left guard if we need it, even though he's a natural right tackle. So Taliese Fuaga, big name on my list at this point, because either way, regardless, we need somebody like this. This is going to become one of my top guys going forward. Last 2 guys here. First is UW Troy Fautanu, who played left tackle for this team the last couple years, but in the NFL projects out to be more of a left guard and can also probably project pretty well to right tackle because it takes a little bit of the onus off of him for protecting the blind side, and I think the move to guard will help protect his not stellar foot speed. So 2 good seasons as the starting left tackle for the Huskies. Nothing crazy over the top in terms of grades. He was a really good pass protector. I mean, there's a reason why Penix never gets sacked. So Fautanu's going to be on the list as a potential first rounder, I feel like, by the time the draft rolls around. He might be a guy you trade down and get, but he is a guy that I would definitely be looking to get if you can get down into like the middle 20s. And final guy is Graham Barton. And this is probably another small trade down guy. You get this guy at the back end of the first, not in the middle of the first. But this guy is somebody I viewed as a left guard prospect for a while. He spent his whole career playing left tackle for Duke, and he did regress a little bit in 2023. 2022, he was definitely better. You can see it in the PFF grade. But there were extenuating circumstances. He missed a decent amount of time in 2023. He was protecting worse quarterbacks because Riley Leonard got hurt, and Duke kind of fell off a cliff after starting out really strong. Not all to do with Graham Barton. So this is a guy who I look at and I go, okay, he's a left tackle in college, but he should bump over to left guard in the NFL. And because of that, he also projects to being able to hold up at right tackle if you need him. So this pick is these picks would all be home runs both ways, I think, because you need help at both positions, and you don't. It's like Schrodinger's depth chart. You don't know until you open the box. You don't know if Abe Lucas is going to be able to hold up over the season until you actually get to the season and the season's being played. So you need a really good backup, but you can't just let that backup be a pure backup. That backup needs to also be able to play another position at a starting caliber level, and these guys all probably would be able to do that. We'll have to see how they measure in at the combine. Like if Amarius Mims is really 6'7", that's kind of tough. But there's definitely somebody here that we can use. All right, so those are the guys who I view as being potential offensive first-round picks for the Seahawks this year. That's really all I have right now. There will probably be some kind of combine late riser or maybe a late faller. Like maybe somebody like a Brock Bowers falls off a cliff and ends up being there in the mid-first. That would be beautiful, but I seriously doubt it. But things like that do happen is the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so I will see you guys later. We're going to do defense in a little bit here, but I just wanted to give my offensive picks for potential Seattle Seahawks first round selections. See you guys later. Go Hawks.